The drone's camera caught every second of it. Noah Riker's custom Camaro screaming past the finish line, leaving 3 other street racers eating his dust on the empty industrial stretch outside Ashridge. The underground racing scene had always been his release, the one place where precision mattered more than politics, where horsepower spoke louder than hollow promises. "Damn beautiful, Noah," Tommy Chen shouted over the engine noise, his own modified Civic still cooling down from the race. "That turbo setup is insane, man. You're gonna clean house at next week's meet." Noah killed the engine and climbed out, adrenaline still coursing through his veins. At 41, he wasn't the youngest guy running these illegal races anymore, but his mechanical genius more than made up for any reflexes time had stolen. The Camaro was his masterpiece. Every bolt, every wire, every custom fabrication born from his own calloused hands. "Thanks for the show, boys," he called to the other racers, already packing up their gear as distant sirens suggested the party was over. The drone operator, some kid with expensive equipment and cheap morals, was already uploading footage to the underground racing forums where Noah's reputation grew with every victory. By midnight, Noah was back at Riker's custom garage, the business he'd built from nothing over the past 15 years. The smell of motor oil and welding sparks felt like home. More home than the suburban house he shared with Elise, if he was being honest. Here, surrounded by half-finished projects and the tools of his trade, everything made sense. He cracked open a beer and fired up his office computer to review the night's footage. The kid had already posted everything online, and Noah found himself grinning at the replay of his perfect launch off the line. But when he minimized the racing video, something else caught his eye. An email notification. New message from an anonymous account. "You might want to see this." The attachment loaded slowly, pixel by pixel, until Noah's blood turned to ice water in his veins. High-resolution photos filled his screen. Elise in black lingerie he'd never seen before, poses that screamed professional photography, bedroom settings that definitely weren't their bedroom. The metadata showed they were taken 3 days ago, while he'd been working late on a customer's Mustang restoration. His hands shook as he scrolled through image after image. His wife of 12 years, the woman who complained about their boring suburban life, who rolled her eyes when he came home with grease under his fingernails, who insisted they needed to elevate their social circle. She was screwing someone else and making it into some kind of artistic statement. The beer bottle shattered against the garage wall before Noah even realized he'd thrown it. Glass shards sparkled under the fluorescent lights like the fragments of his marriage, sharp and impossible to put back together. He didn't remember driving home, didn't remember taking the stairs 2 at a time, his work boots thundering against the hardwood Elise had insisted they install last year. "Investment in our future," she'd called it. Future. What a goddamn joke. The bedroom door was locked. It was never locked. Noah's shoulder hit the wood with 15 years of suppressed rage behind it. The door frame splintered, the lock mechanism tearing free in a shower of splinters and screws. But the room beyond was empty. The bed perfectly made with those expensive sheets Elise had ordered from some catalog. On the nightstand, carelessly left like breadcrumbs for him to follow, was a hotel receipt. The Ashridge Grand, the fanciest place in their boring little city. Presidential suite, 2 nights, paid for by Cole Tanner, DDS. Noah's vision went red around the edges. Cole damn Tanner, the dentist who'd been revolutionizing Elise's career opportunities. The smooth-talking a-hole who drove a BMW and wore suits that cost more than most people's monthly rent. The man his wife had been spending more and more time with, always for professional development and networking opportunities. His phone was already in his hand, Elise's number dialing before rational thought could intervene. It rang once, twice. "Oh, Cole, you're so bad!" Elise's voice was breathless, giggling, completely unguarded. "I can't believe you want to do it again so soon!" "Elise!" Noah's voice came out like gravel over broken glass. The silence on the other end stretched for an eternity. Then, in a tone he'd never heard from his wife before, cold, calculating, completely devoid of the shame he'd expected, she said, "How long have you been standing there, Noah?" The confrontation came at dawn, when Elise finally slithered back to their house like some guilty snake returning to its den. Noah had spent the night in his garage, surrounded by the honest smell of motor oil and metal, trying to process the magnitude of his wife's betrayal. But when she walked through their front door at 6:47 a.m., wearing the same clothes from yesterday and reeking of expensive cologne that definitely wasn't his, all the rage came flooding back. "So," he said from the kitchen table, where he'd been drinking coffee and staring at those photographs for the past 6 hours. Dr. Cole Tanner. How long? Elise didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. She set down her purse, a designer bag he'd never seen before, and examined her manicured nails like this was some minor inconvenience interrupting her busy schedule. Does it matter? Her voice carried that superior tone she'd developed over the past few years, the one that made him feel like he was some kind of servant in his own home. Look at yourself, Noah. Look at this place. You think I was going to spend the rest of my life pretending to be satisfied with this? She gestured around their kitchen, at the house they'd bought together when they still believed in shared dreams, the mortgage he'd worked double shifts to pay, the life he'd built thinking it meant something to both of them. 12 years, Noah said quietly. 12 damn years I busted my A for this family. For you. For me. Elise laughed, the sound like broken glass. You worked for your precious garage. You worked for your stupid cars and your juvenile racing fantasies. When was the last time you took me somewhere that mattered? When was the last time you introduced me to people who could actually do something for my career? Your career. You're a dental assistant, Elise, not the Surgeon General. The slap came fast and hard, her palm cracking against his cheek with enough force to snap his head sideways. But what shocked him more than the violence was the cold satisfaction in her eyes afterward. I was beneath you all along, wasn't I? She said. Poor little Noah, stuck with his gold-digging wife. Well, guess what? You were right. You were always beneath me. Cole sees that. Cole appreciates what I have to offer. She turned to leave, but Noah's voice stopped her at the doorway. The business account, Elise? The one we set up for the garage expansion? You've been taking money from it. For the first time since she'd walked in, uncertainty flickered across her perfect features. I don't know what you're talking about. $23,000 over the past 4 months. Small withdrawals, but they add up. I may work with my hands, but I'm not stupid. That's impossible. I would never... The GPS log from your car tells an interesting story, too. Tuesdays and Thursdays at the Ashridge Grand. Fridays at that strip mall jewelry store where Cole probably buys you all those pretty things. Weekends at the marina where his boat is docked. Elise's face had gone pale under her expensive makeup. You've been spying on me. I've been paying attention. Something I should have done a long time ago. She was quiet for a long moment, and Noah almost thought he saw a flicker of the woman he'd married. The one who used to laugh at his terrible jokes and fall asleep on his shoulder during late-night movies. But when she spoke again, her voice was pure venom. You want to play detective, Noah? Fine, but you won't like what you find. After she left, speeding away in the Lexus SUV he'd co-signed for, Noah sat in the wreckage of his kitchen and tried to figure out his next move. The smart thing would be to call a lawyer, file for divorce, try to salvage what he could from the financial carnage. The smart thing. Instead, he drove across town to the law offices of Kane & Associates, where Alexandria Kane, Lexi to her friends, had built a reputation as the kind of attorney who didn't lose cases because she didn't take cases she couldn't win. He'd known Lexi in high school, back when she was the brainy girl who tutored him in chemistry and secretly came to watch his amateur racing victories at the old airstrip outside town. She'd gone on to Harvard Law while he'd stayed in Ashridge to build his business. They'd stayed in touch sporadically over the years. Holiday cards, the occasional beer when she was in town visiting family. Professional courtesy between old friends. The receptionist tried to tell him Lexi was booked solid for the next month, but Noah had come too far to be turned away by scheduling conflicts. Tell her Noah Riker is here about a vehicle dispute, he said. She'll want to see me. 10 minutes later, he was sitting across from Lexi Kane in her corner office, surrounded by law books and framed newspaper articles about her courtroom victories. She looked exactly like what she was, a woman who'd clawed her way to the top of a male-dominated profession and enjoyed the view from there. Vehicle dispute? She said with a slight smile. Let me guess. Someone's trying to stiff you on a custom job? Something like that. Noah pulled out his phone and showed her the hotel receipt, the anonymous photos, the bank statements he'd printed that morning. My wife's been stealing from our business to fund an affair with her boss. Now I'm pretty sure they're planning to screw me over in ways that'll make the cheating look like a parking ticket. Lexi's expression shifted from amused to coldly professional as she examined the evidence. This was why she'd never lost a case. She could read a situation faster than most people could process what they were looking at. Noah, I'm going to be straight with you. If what you're showing me is accurate, you're not just looking at infidelity and embezzlement. This has the smell of a setup. How much access does Elise have to your business accounts? Full access. She handles most of the paperwork while I focus on the mechanical side. And Dr. Tanner, you said he's her boss, owns the dental clinic where she works. High-end cosmetic stuff. Rich clientele. Lexi leaned back in her leather chair, fingers steepled in thought. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to go home and act like nothing has changed. Loving husband, confused and hurt but willing to work on the marriage. Meanwhile, you're going to document everything. Every conversation, every financial transaction, every time she leaves the house. You think they're planning something bigger? I think a woman who's been stealing from her husband to fund an affair with a dentist who drives a BMW isn't playing small ball. And if I'm right, we need to be 3 steps ahead of whatever they're cooking up. Noah spent the rest of that day installing surveillance equipment with the same meticulous attention to detail he brought to engine rebuilds. Micro cameras in the common areas of their house, GPS trackers on both cars, audio recording devices in Elise's purse and briefcase. If his wife wanted to play games, he'd make sure he knew the rules. The dashcam installation in her Lexus was particularly satisfying. A tiny device hidden behind the rearview mirror that would record both video and audio whenever the vehicle was running. Elise had always been a talker, especially when she thought no one was listening. That evening, she came home with takeout from an expensive restaurant downtown and an expression of wounded innocence that would have won her an Academy Award. Noah, baby, I've been thinking about what happened this morning. I was cruel, and I'm sorry. This thing with Cole, it just happened. I never meant for it to go this far. She was good. If he hadn't seen those photographs, hadn't traced the money trail, hadn't installed recording equipment throughout their house, he might have actually believed her. I just want to understand, Elise. How did we get here? I don't know. I think I was just feeling unappreciated, like we were roommates instead of lovers. Cole made me feel special again, desired. Noah nodded and made appropriate noises about counseling and working through their problems. Meanwhile, the audio recorder in her purse was capturing every word, and the micro camera in their kitchen was documenting her performance for posterity. Later that night, after Elise had gone to bed, Noah reviewed the day's recordings. Most of it was routine. Phone calls to friends, conversations with coworkers, the mundane details of a life built on lies. But one phone call made while she was driving home from work changed everything. "It's me," Elise's voice said through the dashcam audio. "He knows about the money. No, I don't think he knows about the rest of it, but we need to move faster. Thursday? That's too soon." Okay, but if this goes wrong, Cole, I swear to God, what do you mean insurance policy? The call ended there, but Noah had heard enough. Whatever Elise and Cole were planning, it was happening Thursday. 2 days away. And they had some kind of backup plan. Insurance that probably involved making sure Noah couldn't interfere. He picked up his phone to call Lexi, then hesitated. He was already crossing lines that would make him look obsessive, possibly criminal if this ended up in court. But as he stared at the evidence mounting against his wife, Noah realized he passed the point of caring about looking like the good guy. Some betrayals were too complete to forgive. Some games were too dirty to play by the rules. Thursday morning brought rain and revelations. Noah had spent the previous 2 days playing the role of the reconciling husband, while his surveillance equipment painted an increasingly disturbing picture of his wife's activities. The dashcam recordings alone would have been enough to end their marriage. Hours of phone conversations detailing financial transfers, meeting locations, and contingency plans that made his blood run cold. But it was the conversation recorded at 11:47 p.m. Wednesday night that convinced him he was dealing with something far more dangerous than simple infidelity. "Officer Marquez," Elise's voice was cautious, uncertain. "This is Elise Riker, Doctor. Tanner said you might be able to help us with a domestic situation." The response was muffled, but Noah could make out enough. "Domestic violence calls are serious business, Mrs. Riker. If your husband has been threatening you..." "He found out about Cole and me. Last night he grabbed my wrist so hard it left marks. I'm scared of what he might do if he finds out about the business loan." Noah's hands clenched into fists as he listened to his wife fabricate a history of misuse with the same casual precision she used to plan dinner parties. Every detail was calculated. The timing, the witnesses, the physical evidence she was apparently manufacturing. Business loan. That was new information. He called Lexi from the garage at dawn while Elise was still asleep. "They're planning to frame me for domestic misuse," he said without preamble. There's a corrupt cop named Marquez involved, and something about a business loan I've never heard of. Slow down. Lexi's voice was alert despite the early hour. What exactly did you hear? Noah played the recording, watching Lexi's expression darken as the implications became clear. Jesus, Noah. They're not just planning to divorce you, they're planning to destroy you. Domestic violence charges, especially with a cooperative police officer, could cost you everything. The garage, the house, probably jail time if they're creative enough with the evidence. What kind of business loan? The kind where your wife forges your signature on documents you've never seen, then claims you authorized the transaction. If Cole's involved, we're probably looking at something substantial. Maybe enough to buy that dental practice outright. Noah felt the last pieces of his old life crumbling around him. The woman he'd married, the woman he'd trusted with everything he'd built, wasn't just betraying him. She was systematically dismantling his existence to fund her new life with another man. What do I do? You fight dirty. File a restraining order against Elise before she can file one against you. Transfer the garage assets into a business trust that she can't touch. And we need to find out everything we can about Dr. Cole Tanner, because men who sleep with married women and bribe cops usually have other secrets worth exposing. The next 12 hours were a masterclass in legal warfare, while Elise spent her day at the dental clinic, presumably coordinating the final details of Noah's destruction. He was across town with Lexi's paralegal team, filing paperwork that would freeze their joint assets and protect his business interests. But the real revelation came when Noah used the computer skills he'd developed for automotive diagnostics to crack into the dental clinic's patient management system. Cole Tanner's practice was certainly successful, too successful for a small city cosmetic dentist with average skills and expensive tastes. Look at this, Noah said, showing Lexi a printout of patient billing records. Same procedures, same insurance codes, but some of these patients don't exist. The addresses are fake. The social security numbers don't match any real people. Insurance fraud, Lexi murmured, scanning the documents. He's been filing claims for procedures he never performed, probably splitting the payments with someone at the insurance company. There's more. Noah pulled up another screen. These bank transfers, he's moving money through offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. This isn't just insurance fraud, it's money laundering on a massive scale. They were so focused on Cole's financial crimes that neither of them noticed the GPS tracker alert until Noah's phone started buzzing insistently. Elise's car was moving, not toward home, but toward the industrial district where Noah's garage was located. She's at my shop, Noah said, checking the live feed. At 10 p.m. on a Thursday. What the hell is she doing there? The dashcam footage answered that question in horrifying detail. Elise wasn't alone. Officer Marquez was with her, along with a man Noah didn't recognize carrying what looked like professional photography equipment. They were staging a crime scene, carefully placing evidence that would support Elise's claims of domestic violence and financial misuse. That's my backup hard drive, Noah said, watching the video feed. The one with all our financial records. They're planning it in my office to make it look like I was hiding assets. But it was what happened next that transformed Noah's anger into something colder and more dangerous. The unknown man, clearly a private investigator or security specialist, was installing hidden cameras throughout the garage, positioning them to record whatever confrontation they were planning to orchestrate. They're going to ambush me, Noah realized. Elise will file her domestic violence complaint tomorrow. I'll be arrested, and while I'm in jail, they'll have complete access to everything I've built. Lexi was already reaching for her phone. We call the FBI. This is conspiracy, fraud, extortion. No. Noah's voice was quiet, controlled. The FBI will take months to build a case, assuming they believe us over a respected dentist and a police officer. By then, Cole and Elise will have disappeared with everything I've worked for. Then what do you suggest? Noah was quiet for a long moment, watching his wife and her accomplices systematically destroy his life through the tiny screen of his phone. When he spoke again, his voice carried a certainty that made Lexi take a step back. I'm going to beat them at their own game, but I'm not playing by their rules anymore. The plan that took shape over the next 2 hours was elegant in its simplicity and brutal in its thoroughness. If Cole and Elise wanted to destroy him using lies and manufactured evidence, Noah would destroy them using the truth and their own greed. First, he would give them exactly what they expected, a confrontation at the garage that would trigger their carefully planned trap. But instead of being the sufferer of their scheme, He would control every aspect of the encounter, recording everything while simultaneously transmitting the evidence to multiple secure locations. Second, he would use their own criminal activities against them. The insurance fraud, the money laundering, the bribery, all of it would be anonymously reported to the appropriate federal agencies, along with detailed evidence that would be impossible to ignore or suppress. Finally, he would ensure that their betrayal became public knowledge in the most humiliating way possible. Sometimes the court of public opinion moved faster than the legal system, and Noah intended to use both. "This is dangerous," Lexi warned. "If they're willing to frame you for domestic violence, they might be willing to do worse." "I know." Noah was already heading for the door. "But I'm not the same man I was a week ago. That man trusted people who didn't deserve it. That man played by rules that only applied to him." As he drove through the rain toward his garage, Noah felt something shifting inside him. A fundamental change that went deeper than anger or hurt. The loyal husband, the honest businessman, the man who believed in fairness and second chances, that version of himself was dying, replaced by something harder and infinitely more dangerous. He'd spent 15 years building a life based on trust and mutual respect. Now he would spend however long it took tearing down the people who had betrayed that trust, using every tool at his disposal and creating new ones as needed. The GPS tracker showed Elise's car still parked behind his garage. Perfect. Let them think they were in control. Let them believe their plan was working. Noah Riker was about to teach them the difference between a sufferer and a hunter. The restaurant Elise chose for their reconciliation dinner was perfect for her purposes. Public enough to provide witnesses, expensive enough to make her feel sophisticated, and equipped with security cameras that would record whatever performance she had planned. Noah arrived 15 minutes early and selected a table with clear sightlines to all entrances, his phone already streaming live video to Lexi's secure server. Elise made her entrance like she was walking a red carpet, dressed in a black cocktail dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. She looked stunning, confident, and completely comfortable with the elaborate deception she was about to execute. Noah found himself genuinely impressed by her commitment to the role. "You look beautiful," he said as she sat down, and meant it. His wife had always been attractive, but there was something different about her now, a carnivory gleam in her eyes that he'd never noticed before, or maybe had chosen not to see. "Thank you." Her smile was warm, practiced, perfect. "I'm glad you wanted to do this, Noah. I think we can work through our problems if we're both committed to being honest with each other." Honest. The irony was so complete it was almost artistic. They ordered wine, made small talk about the weather and current events, played the parts of a married couple trying to rebuild their relationship after a rough patch. Elise was particularly convincing, touching his hand at appropriate moments, laughing at his attempts at humor, gazing into his eyes with what looked like genuine affection. It wasn't until the main course arrived that she began to reveal the true purpose of the evening. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice dropping to the intimate tone she'd once used for pillow talk. "About Cole. You deserve to know the whole truth. I'm listening." "It started 6 months ago. He was going through a difficult divorce. I was feeling neglected at home, and one thing led to another. But it was never meant to be serious, Noah. It was just..." "An escape?" She was good. Her eyes even managed to produce tears on cue. If Noah hadn't heard the recordings of her planning this exact conversation with Cole, he might have been moved by the performance. An escape from what? From feeling invisible, from being taken for granted, from pretending that working 60 hours a week in a garage was the pinnacle of success? The mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the contempt underneath. "Do you know what it's like to go to social events and have people ask what my husband does for a living? A mechanic, I tell them. A very good mechanic. And then they change the subject because what else is there to say? I see. Cole makes me feel important, valued, like I have something to offer beyond just this." She gestured around the restaurant, at the life they'd built together, at everything Noah had worked to provide. This was it, the moment she would make her play. Noah leaned forward slightly, making sure the phone's microphone would capture every word clearly. "What do you want, Elise?" Her smile returned, triumphant and terrible. "I want a divorce, clean, simple, amicable. You keep the garage, I keep the house. We split everything else 50-50 and go our separate ways." "And Cole?" Cole and I are going to start fresh. He's buying a new practice in California, somewhere we can build something real together. Somewhere people understand ambition. Noah nodded thoughtfully, as if considering her proposal. What about the money you took from the business account? What money? The $23,000, Elise. The transfers you've been making for the past 4 months. For the first time since she'd sat down, uncertainty flickered across her features, but she recovered quickly, the mask sliding back into place. I don't know what you're talking about. If there's money missing from the business account, maybe you should look at your own spending. Those racing modifications don't pay for themselves. What about the business loan? The one you co-signed using my information? This time, the uncertainty lasted longer. Elise's eyes darted around the restaurant, looking for escape routes or hidden threats. When she spoke again, her voice carried a note of desperation she couldn't quite conceal. You're being paranoid, Noah. There's no loan. There's no conspiracy. I made a mistake with Cole. I'm trying to make it right, and you're acting like some kind of detective. Private investigator, actually, the one Officer Marquez hired to document my alleged misuse. Interesting that you would mention conspiracies. The color drained from Elise's face as she realized how completely she'd been outmaneuvered. But instead of backing down, she doubled down on the lies with a desperation that was almost admirable. I don't know what game you think you're playing, but it ends now. She stood up, speaking loudly enough for other diners to hear. I won't be threatened anymore. I won't live in fear. She was playing to the crowd now, turning their private conversation into a public spectacle designed to support her domestic violence narrative. Other patrons were starting to stare, exactly as she'd planned. But Noah had planned for this too. Sit down, Elise. We're not done talking. Don't you dare tell me what to do. Her voice was rising, becoming shrill. I'm leaving, and if I try to stop you, you'll call Officer Marquez and report that I attacked you in public. Then tomorrow morning, you'll file for divorce and a restraining order, using tonight's scene as evidence that I'm dangerous. Meanwhile, Cole will finalize the transfer of assets from the fake business loan, and by the time I get out of jail, everything I've worked for will be gone. The silence that followed was absolute. Elise stood frozen beside their table, her carefully constructed performance crumbling as she realized that Noah knew everything. Not just about the affair, but about the entire conspiracy designed to destroy him. How? She whispered. Sit down and I'll tell you. She sat, her movements mechanical, defeated. The other diners gradually returned to their own conversations, the drama apparently resolved. The dashcam in your car records both video and audio, Noah said conversationally, cutting into his steak as if they were discussing the weather. The GPS tracker shows me exactly where you go and when. The audio devices I planted in your purse and briefcase have been recording your conversations for the past week. That's illegal, probably. But then again, so is embezzlement, insurance fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, and filing false police reports. I figure we're about even on the illegal activities front. Elise was staring at him like she'd never seen him before. And in a sense, she hadn't. The man she'd married, trusting, loyal, willing to work within the system, was gone. In his place sat someone who'd learned to think like the hunters who'd been hunting him. What do you want? I want you to call Cole right now and tell him the plan is off. I want you to withdraw the complaint you filed with Officer Marquez. And I want you to transfer every penny you stole back to the business account. And if I don't? Noah pulled out a manila envelope and placed it on the table between them. Then tomorrow morning, the FBI receives copies of Cole's fraudulent insurance claims, his money laundering operation, and recordings of both of your voices discussing how to frame me for domestic violence. The IRS gets documentation of unreported income and tax evasion. The state dental board gets evidence of malpractice and patient fraud. And the local newspaper gets the whole sordid story, complete with photographs and audio recordings. Elise opened the envelope with trembling hands, her face growing paler with each document she examined. It was all there. Bank records, phone transcripts, photographic evidence, witness statements. Her entire life for the past 6 months documented and organized like a case file. You son of a witch, she whispered. I learned from the best. Noah raised his wineglass in a mock toast. To my loving wife, who taught me that sometimes the only way to protect yourself from hunters is to become a bigger hunter. The phone call to Cole was brief and brutal. Noah listened to one side of a conversation that clearly involved screaming, threats, and the rapid dissolution of their carefully laid plans. When Elise hung up, she looked like she'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. "He's not going to forgive this," she said. "Neither am I." They finished dinner in silence. Two people who'd once shared dreams and promises, now sitting across from each other like opposing generals discussing terms of surrender. When the check came, Noah paid with cash. No point leaving a credit card trail for what he suspected would be an eventful evening. In the parking lot, as they walked to their separate cars, Elise made one last attempt to salvage something from the wreckage. "We could still make this work, Noah. The divorce, I mean. Clean break, no hard feelings. You've made your point." "Have I?" Noah stopped beside his truck, studying his wife's face in the harsh light of the parking lot. "You see, that's the problem, Elise. I don't think I have made my point. You still think this is negotiable. You still think you can walk away from what you've done and start fresh with Cole in California. What are you saying?" "I'm saying that some betrayals are too complete to forgive. Some games are too dirty to walk away from. You want to play hardball? Fine. But understand that I'm not playing to win anymore. I'm playing to make sure you lose everything." As Noah drove home through the rain-slicked streets of Ashridge, he felt something dark and satisfied settling into his chest. The loyal husband was truly dead now, replaced by something harder and infinitely more dangerous. Tomorrow, the real war would begin. His phone buzzed with a text from Lexi. "Divorce papers filed an hour ago. Restraining order hearing scheduled for Monday. Battery charges filed 30 minutes ago." Noah smiled in the darkness of his truck. Elise had kept her word about calling off Officer Marquez. She'd simply called him to accelerate the timeline instead. Now, the trap she'd spent weeks setting was closing around him exactly as planned. Perfect. Let them think they were still in control. Let them believe their backup plan was working. Noah Riker was about to teach them the difference between winning a battle and winning a war. The Ashridge County Courthouse had seen its share of bitter divorces, but nothing quite prepared the assembled legal teams for the systematic destruction that Lexi Kane unleashed on Monday morning. Noah sat in the defendant's chair, wearing his best suit and the expression of a man who'd been wrongfully accused, while Elise's attorney, a slick corporate lawyer named Marcus Webb, prepared to present what he clearly believed was an airtight case. "Your Honor," Webb began, his voice carrying the practiced authority of someone who'd never lost a domestic violence hearing. "My client has been the sufferer of an escalating pattern of misuse and intimidation. The defendant has been stalking Mrs. Riker, has made threats against her safety, and last Thursday evening physically attacked her during a confrontation at their residence." Judge Patricia Morrison was known for her no-nonsense approach to domestic disputes and her zero tolerance for men who hurt women. Webb had chosen his venue carefully. Morrison had never ruled in favor of a defendant in a domestic violence case during her 12 years on the bench. "Mrs. Riker," the judge said, turning her attention to Elise, who was dressed like a sufferer of domestic misuse straight from Central Casting, "please tell the court about the incident on Thursday evening." Elise's testimony was masterful, a carefully orchestrated performance that painted Noah as an increasingly unstable man who'd become violent when confronted about his financial improprieties. She described weeks of intimidation, shouting matches that terrified her, and finally the physical attack that had left bruises on her wrists and arms. "He grabbed me so hard I thought he was going to break my arm," she said, tears streaming down her face. "He kept screaming about money, about how I was stealing from him, but I don't know anything about the business finances." "I just want to be safe." The photographic evidence was compelling. Clear images of bruising on Elise's wrists and forearms, medical documentation of the injuries, and witness statements from co-workers who claimed to have noticed her nervous behavior. In recent weeks, Officer Marquez took the stand next, his testimony polished and professional. He described responding to Elise's initial complaint, documenting her injuries and his growing concern about Noah's escalating pattern of controlling behavior. "In my experience," Marquez told the court, "men like Mr. Riker often start with financial control and psychological intimidation before moving to physical violence. Mrs. Riker is fortunate she reached out for help when she did." By the time Webb finished presenting his case, Noah looked like a textbook domestic misuser who'd finally been caught. Judge Morrison's expression suggested she was ready to issue the restraining order and recommend criminal charges. Then Lexi Kane stood up. Your Honor, before we proceed, I'd like to present some additional evidence that I believe will shed new light on these allegations. Webb objected immediately. Your Honor, the defense has had ample opportunity to present evidence. This appears to be a delay tactic. Overruled, Judge Morrison said, her curiosity clearly piqued. Miss Kane, you have 30 minutes. What happened next was like watching a master surgeon systematically disassemble a human body. Lexi began with financial records, projecting bank statements onto the courtroom's display screen that showed a clear pattern of unauthorized withdrawals from the Riker business account. These transfers, Lexi explained, total $47,000 over the past 6 months, all authorized using Mrs. Riker's access credentials, all deposited into accounts controlled by Dr. Cole Tanner. Webb tried to object, but Lexi had documentation for everything. Bank authorizations, signature comparisons, IP address logs showing the transfers had been initiated from Elise's work computer at the dental clinic. Furthermore, Lexi continued, these transfers correspond directly with a series of fraudulent business loans that Mrs. Riker co-signed using forged documentation bearing my client's signature. The loan documents were devastating. $200,000 in business credit secured against the garage's assets, with Noah's forged signature authorizing the debt. Handwriting analysis confirmed the forgery, and bank surveillance footage showed Elise signing the documents while Cole Tanner looked on. Your Honor, Lexi said, her voice cutting through the courtroom like a blade, my client didn't attack his wife. He discovered that she was systematically embezzling from their business to fund an affair with her employer, who was using the stolen money to expand his own practice while simultaneously framing my client for domestic violence to prevent him from pressing charges. Judge Morrison was staring at the evidence with the expression of someone who'd just discovered she'd been thoroughly deceived. Oh, Miss Kane, are you suggesting that Mrs. Riker fabricated these injuries? I'm not suggesting it, Your Honor. I'm proving it. The video evidence was the eliminate shot. Lexi played the surveillance footage from the garage on Thursday night, showing Elise, Officer Marquez, and an unknown accomplice staging the crime scene that would support her domestic violence claims. The audio was crystal clear. Elise's voice discussing how to make the bruises look convincing, Marquez coaching her on what to say in her testimony. But it was the dash cam footage from Elise's car that destroyed any remaining credibility she might have had. Hours of recorded conversations between Elise and Cole, planning every detail of their scheme, discussing how to maximize their financial gain while ensuring Noah went to prison for crimes he didn't commit. She's laughing, Judge Morrison said quietly, listening to Elise's voice on the recording. She's laughing about destroying her husband's life. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of Elise's recorded laughter echoing from the speakers. Webb was frantically shuffling papers, trying to find some way to salvage his case, while Elise sat at the plaintiff's table, looking like she wanted to disappear into the floor. There's more, Your Honor, Lexi said, and Noah could see the anticipation in her eyes. This was why she'd never lost a case. She didn't just win, she obliterated the opposition so completely that they never recovered. The insurance fraud documentation was presented with the same methodical precision. Fake patient files, fraudulent billing codes, money transfers to offshore accounts. Cole Tanner's entire criminal enterprise laid bare in excruciating detail. Dr. Tanner has been using his dental practice as a front for money laundering operations, totaling over $2 million, Lexi explained. Mrs. Riker wasn't just having an affair. She was participating in a criminal conspiracy that spans multiple federal jurisdictions. The final piece of evidence was almost anticlimactic. Phone records showing conversations between Elise, Cole, and Officer Marquez dating back 8 months, long before the alleged domestic violence began. They'd been planning to destroy Noah from the beginning, using the affair as cover for a systematic theft operation that would have left him bankrupt and imprisoned. When Lexi finished her presentation, the courtroom was silent except for the sound of Elise crying. Real tears this time, not the manufactured emotion she'd displayed during her testimony. Judge Morrison looked like she'd just witnessed a masterclass in legal warfare. Mr. Webb, the judge said, her voice cold as winter stone, does your client wish to revise her testimony in light of this new evidence? Webb whispered frantically with Elise for several minutes before standing. Your Honor, my client. My client wishes to withdraw her complaint at this time. I'll bet she does. Judge Morrison's voice carried 20 years of judicial experience and a profound disgust for people who misuse the legal system. Miss Kane, I assume you'll be filing countercharges? Extensively, Your Honor. Perjury, conspiracy, fraud, embezzlement, filing false police reports, and a civil suit for damages that will ensure my client recovers everything he's lost, plus punitive damages for the emotional distress of this ordeal. As they left the courthouse, Noah felt a dark satisfaction settling into his bones. The loyal husband was truly dead now, replaced by something that understood the brutal mathematics of revenge. But the war wasn't over. It was just beginning. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "You think you've won? This isn't over." C. Cole Tanner was about to learn that some enemies were too dangerous to threaten. The media attention was immediate and brutal. By Tuesday evening, Elise's face was on the front page of the Ashridge Herald under the headline, "Suburban Schemer, Local Woman's Plot to Frame Husband Exposed in Court." The story had everything small-town newspapers loved: sex, money, betrayal, and a dramatic courtroom revelation that made the plaintiff look like a complete sociopath. Noah should have felt vindicated. His reputation was restored, his business protected, and his wife's credibility destroyed so thoroughly that she'd never recover from it. But Cole Tanner's threatening text message had triggered something deeper than satisfaction. A carnivore instinct that wouldn't be satisfied until the threat was completely eliminated. Wednesday morning brought the news that Cole had liquidated his assets and closed his dental practice overnight. According to the bank records Lexi's investigators had obtained, he'd transferred nearly $400,000 to an untraceable cryptocurrency account and purchased a one-way ticket to a non-extradition country. "He's running," Lexi said during their emergency meeting, and probably figured out that the FBI investigation was closing in and decided to cut his losses. "What about Elise? She's not going anywhere." Her passport was suspended pending the criminal investigation, and frankly, she doesn't have the resources to disappear like Cole does. Without his financial backing, she's just another suburban housewife facing serious federal charges. But Noah's instincts were screaming that something was wrong. Cole Tanner wasn't the type to abandon a profitable operation without exhausting every option first. Men like him didn't run. They doubled down, got desperate, started making mistakes that turned them from hunters into something much more dangerous. The answer came at 3:47 a.m. Thursday morning, when Noah's security system alerted him to movement in his garage. The cameras showed two figures breaking into his shop, moving with the practiced efficiency of professionals. But it wasn't Cole. It was Elise and another man Noah didn't recognize, both armed and clearly desperate. Noah's first instinct was to call the police, but something made him hesitate. These weren't random burglars looking for tools to steal. They were searching for something specific, tearing through his office files with an urgency that suggested they were running out of time. Then he heard Elise's voice through the audio feed, and everything became clear. "It has to be here somewhere," she was saying. "Cole said Noah had copies of everything hidden in the garage." "What if he moved them?" The other man's voice was nervous, scared. "What if the lawyer has everything? Then we're screwed. Cole's already in the wind. And if those FBI agents find what they're looking for, I'm going to prison for 20 years. Noah realized what they were after, the evidence he'd gathered about Cole's money laundering operation. But what they didn't know was that he'd moved everything to a secure location days ago, leaving only decoy files in his office safe. His phone buzzed with a text message from Cole's number. "I have your lawyer. You want to see her alive again? You'll bring me the financial records and cryptocurrency access codes. Warehouse District, Building 47. Come alone, or she dies." The attached photograph showed Lexi bound and gagged in what looked like an abandoned industrial space, very much alive but clearly terrified. Cole's desperation had finally pushed him past the point of rational criminality into something approaching madness. Noah's transformation was complete in that moment. The loyal husband was gone. The law-abiding businessman was gone. Even the calculating revenge seeker was gone. What remained was something primal and infinitely more dangerous. A hunter who'd just had his territory invaded and his pack threatened. He armed himself with tools from his garage, not weapons exactly, but instruments that could serve multiple purposes in the right hands. A plasma cutter, welding equipment, automotive diagnostic tools that could track electronic signals. If Cole wanted to play professional hijacker, Noah would show him what 15 years of precision engineering could accomplish when applied to human problems. The warehouse district after midnight was a maze of abandoned buildings and broken streetlights, perfect for the kind of confrontation Cole had in mind. Building 47 was a 3-story industrial structure that had been empty for years, its windows boarded up and its loading docks sealed with rusted metal sheeting. Noah found the entrance Cole had left open, a service door that led into a cavernous space filled with abandoned machinery and shadows. But instead of walking into the obvious trap, he used his plasma cutter to create his own entrance through a rear wall, moving through the building like a ghost while his automotive diagnostic equipment tracked the electronic signatures of Cole's phone and whatever surveillance gear he was using. The confrontation, when it came, was almost anticlimactic. Cole was waiting in the center of the main floor, Lexi tied to a chair beside him, a pistol in his hand, and the confidence of a man who thought he controlled the situation. "Noah," he called out when he heard footsteps in the darkness. "I know you're here. Time to make a deal." "I'm listening," Noah replied, but his voice came from a different direction than Cole expected. The acoustics of the empty warehouse made it impossible to pinpoint his location. The financial records, the cryptocurrency keys, everything you gave to the FBI. "I want it all, and I want it within the hour or your girlfriend dies." "She's not my girlfriend. She's my lawyer." "Whatever. The point is, she's dead if you don't cooperate." Noah was already moving, using the building's infrastructure to mask his approach. 15 years of crawling under cars and working in tight spaces had given him an advantage Cole couldn't have anticipated: the ability to move silently through industrial spaces while carrying the tools he needed. "Here's a better deal," Noah said, his voice now coming from directly behind Cole. "You let her go, and I don't use this plasma cutter to separate your head from your shoulders." Cole spun around, the pistol wavering as he tried to locate Noah in the maze of shadows and abandoned equipment. But Noah was already inside his defensive perimeter, the plasma cutter's flame throwing wild shadows across the warehouse walls. The fight was brutal and decisive. Cole had a tool, but Noah had 15 years of working with dangerous tools in confined spaces. The plasma cutter's flame made an excellent distraction, and Cole's desperation made him sloppy. When the confrontation ended, Cole was on the ground with the plasma cutter's tip pressed against his throat, very much alive but completely defeated. You have 2 choices," Noah said, his voice calm despite the adrenaline coursing through his system. "Choice 1. I call the police, you go to prison for abduction and attempted homicide, and you spend the next 20 years learning what happens to pretty boy dentists in federal prison. What's choice 2? Choice 2. You transfer every penny you stole back to my accounts. You confess to everything in a video statement that exonerates Elise completely, and you disappear forever. But if I ever see you again, if you ever contact anyone I care about, if you even think about coming back to Ashridge, I will hunt you down and finish what we started here tonight." Cole chose option 2. The video confession was thorough and damning. Cole admitting to the insurance fraud, the money laundering, the manipulation of Elise, and the abduction of Lexi. He painted himself as the mastermind behind everything, portraying Elise as a sufferer of his manipulation rather than a willing co-conspirator. "Why?" Noah asked as Cole prepared to leave. "You had a successful practice, a good life. Why throw it all away?" Cole's laugh was bitter, defeated. "Because it wasn't enough." It's never enough when you're competing with guys like you, guys who build something real with their hands instead of stealing it from other people. Elise saw that. Eventually, she saw which one of us was actually worth something. As Cole disappeared into the night, probably forever, Noah untied Lexi and helped her to her feet. She was shaken, but unharmed, and her first words were characteristically professional. "That was incredibly stupid and incredibly effective," she said, "also probably illegal in about 6 different ways." "Are you going to report me?" "For what?" "I was abducted by a desperate criminal who confessed to everything before fleeing the jurisdiction. You were the concerned husband who helped law enforcement locate me. End of story." They burned Cole's written confession, but kept multiple copies of the video. Insurance against any future problems. By dawn, Elise had been released from custody, officially a sufferer of Cole's manipulation rather than a co-conspirator in his schemes. The media painted her as another woman deceived by a charismatic hunter, and public sympathy shifted in her favor almost overnight. Noah could have felt sorry for her, could have taken satisfaction in her public humiliation and legal troubles. Instead, he felt nothing at all. The cold emptiness of a man who'd systematically destroyed everyone who'd betrayed him, and found the experience less satisfying than he'd expected. 6 months later, Noah stood in the showroom of his third custom automotive shop, watching a customer examine a pristine 1967 Mustang that had taken his team 4 months to restore. The business expansion had been funded entirely by the settlement money from his lawsuit against Cole and Elise, nearly $2 million in damages that had transformed his modest garage into a luxury automotive empire. Mr. Riker? The customer was a tech executive from California, the kind of man who collected rare cars like other people collected stamps. This is incredible work. How soon could you start on my AITA 69 Camaro? We're booking into next year, Noah replied, handing him a business card. But I can put you on the waiting list. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd become exactly the kind of successful businessman that Elise had always claimed to want in a husband. The difference was that she was no longer around to enjoy it. The divorce had been finalized 3 months ago, with Elise receiving exactly nothing from the settlement. Her participation in Cole's schemes, even as a sufferer, according to the official record, had voided any claim to community property. She'd moved back in with her parents and taken a job at a discount dental clinic across town, her social circle and professional reputation destroyed beyond repair. Noah occasionally saw her around Ashridge, usually at the grocery store or gas station, always alone and always looking older than her 39 years. They never spoke. What was there to say? Lexi had become a frequent visitor to his shops, ostensibly to handle the legal aspects of his business expansion, but increasingly for reasons that had nothing to do with law. Their old friendship had evolved into something deeper during the months of legal warfare, and Noah found himself looking forward to her visits with an anticipation he hadn't felt since his early days with Elise. "Busy day?" Lexi asked, appearing in the showroom doorway with coffee and the amused expression she wore when she'd been watching him work. 3 consultations, 2 new contracts, and a reporter from Motor Trend who wants to do a feature story about the business. Noah accepted the coffee gratefully. "Sometimes I think Cole did me a favor by trying to destroy my life. Funny how that works. You build something honest and small, someone tries to tear it down, and you end up building something bigger and more successful than you ever imagined." They walked through the shop together, past the restoration bays where his expanded team of mechanics worked on projects that ranged from classic muscle cars to modern supercars. The business had grown beyond anything Noah had envisioned when he'd started with a single garage and a dream of working with his hands. "Any word from our friends?" Noah asked. "Cole's apparently living somewhere in Southeast Asia, probably spending what's left of his money on a beach somewhere. Elise?" Lexi shrugged. "Last I heard, she was seeing a chiropractor from the next town over. Apparently, she's learned to aim lower." And Marquez pleaded guilty to corruption charges. Got 3 years in federal prison. Lost his pension, his house, his reputation. His wife divorced him and moved to Florida with their kids. Noah nodded, feeling the same cold satisfaction he'd experienced when each of his enemies had finally faced the consequences of their actions. It wasn't joy, exactly, more like the mechanical satisfaction of an engine running smoothly after a complete rebuild. That evening, Noah and Lexi drove up to the bluffs overlooking Ashridge, the same place where he'd once brought Elise during their early dating years. The view hadn't changed. The city lights stretched out below them like a circuit board, beautiful and ordered and completely predictable. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you just filed for divorce and walked away?" Lexi asked. Noah considered the question while sipping beer and watching the sun set over the industrial landscape that had shaped his life. "Sometimes, but I don't think it would have worked out the same way." "How so?" "The man I used to be, the loyal husband, the trusting businessman, he would have gotten destroyed by people like Cole and Elise. They would have taken everything and disappeared, and I would have spent the rest of my life wondering what hit me." "And the man you are now?" "The man I am now understands that loyalty is a luxury you can only afford with people who deserve it. Trust is something you earn and verify, and sometimes the only way to protect what you've built is to become more dangerous than the people trying to tear it down." As they drove back toward town, Noah's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. For a moment, his blood ran cold, memories of Cole's threatening messages and the violence that had followed. But when he checked the message, it was from a potential customer interested in commissioning a custom build. "Everything okay?" Lexi asked, noticing his tension. "Yeah, just someone wanting to do business." They spent the night at Noah's new house, a modern steel and glass structure that looked more like an art museum than a suburban home. It was exactly the kind of place Elise had always claimed to want, filled with expensive furniture and sophisticated artwork. The irony was perfect and somehow satisfying. Later, as Lexi slept beside him, Noah stood on his bedroom balcony and looked out over the city he'd conquered through systematic destruction of everyone who'd underestimated him. The loyal husband was truly dead, replaced by something harder and infinitely more successful. His phone buzzed again. Another potential customer, another opportunity to build something beautiful from raw materials and expert craftsmanship. Noah Riker's Custom Automotive had become the most successful luxury car shop in the region, booked solid for 18 months and commanding prices that would have seemed impossible just a year ago. Success, he'd learned, wasn't about being the good guy or playing by the rules. Success was about understanding the game better than your opponents and being willing to do whatever it took to win. Some people called it ruthless. Noah called it evolution. He'd started as a loyal husband and honest businessman. He'd ended as something much more dangerous, a hunter who'd learned to think 3 moves ahead and strike without warning when threatened. The transformation had cost him his marriage, his innocence, and probably his soul. But looking out over the empire he'd built from the ashes of his old life, Noah found that he could live with the price he'd paid. The Camaro in his garage needed final adjustments before tomorrow's delivery. He had 3 new consultations scheduled for next week. Motor Trend wanted to feature his work in their annual Masters of the Craft issue. Life was good for the man who'd learned to fight as dirty as his enemies. Noah Riker went inside to plan his next move.